and today we have Monica Devagudi. That's how Devagudi Monica, or,
Yes, sir.
right? She has secured rank 75 in CSE 2020. She's currently in Indian Defence Estate Service, working in Kannur, in Kerala. She has secured rank 465 in CSE 2017. Has a background of BTech in chemical engineering from IIT Kanpur. She also has a master's in public policy from University of Maryland in 2018. Her optional is psychology. And so I'll pass on the session to Monica. She'll speak about her strategy and approach and everything, which will be followed by a set of questions. If anybody wants to ask questions, we'll take those questions as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Monica.
Yes, sir. So good evening, sir, and good evening, everyone. I'm Monica, and I've secured rank 75 this time, and I was a student of mainstreaming at Shankar IAS. And through mainstreaming, I was able to work on improving my marks in especially the GS papers, GS 1, 2, 3, 4. What I've realized is that we have always heard that giving mock tests, etc., is very important. But what I've realized through my attempt is that it's very important to go through iterations of these mock tests. Like, for example, first iteration, you do all 4 papers. Second iteration, you do all 4 papers. And in between iterations, it's very important to take feedback. Only when you take feedback and then work on that feedback, one is able to, you are able to actually use the mock test properly. So that's what I was able to do through the mainstreaming test series this time. And I think that has made a difference. So majorly, it's been what I have added to my preparation from my previous attempt was this writing many tests in iterations and not repeating the same mistakes again, and adding whatever has been told to me in the previous iteration that this has to be done. So if you do this continuously, I think it's impossible to not improve your answers and your speed. It's everything that would improve your overall performance in the papers. So this is mainly about mains, I would say, and I think this is my major thing that I would like to say. And further, I would like, if sir would like to discuss, I would continue on those lines.
So what I was expecting is that if you could, because you have qualified prelims multiple times, you have qualified mains more than once.
Yes.
If you could briefly discuss your strategy about prelims.
Yes.
What do you do? What do you what is your note-making strategy?
Yes.
How many times do you revise? Do you solve tests?
Yes.
Things like that. I think we'll go from an exam perspective from mains, from prelims, mains, interview.
Yes. Yes.
And if possible in mains, if you could speak about GS 1, 2, 3, 4. I see you have very high scores in ethics. I think 111 is your score in ethics. So
yes,
if you have some paper-specific suggestions also, I think that would be great.
So first, if we start with prelims, sir, I think the prelims since 2018, sir, it has become really difficult and tricky. As before that, it used to be relatively simpler, I would say, but now it has become very tricky. I cannot say a strategy 100% with surety, but I can say what I have done for prelims. What I've done again is the same. I've taken mock tests. I've taken many mock tests, maybe 60 to 100 before the prelims. And coming to revision regarding prelims, I have revised the same things again and again. So instead of going to new material, whatever is the material that you have chosen, the basic books and the current affairs material, just stick to it, and you could make shorter notes out of it and revise the same. Because in prelims, it's very important to be confident on the examination day. So if we read the same thing from multiple sources, we are bound to get confused even if we know the concept. So it's important to read the same thing again and again and not be lured by that something new has come up, so let us open this and read. So it's about being very confident on the examination day. So apart from revision and mock tests, third point in prelims would be the examination day. On the examination day, it's important to be very cool-headed and everything that we always speak about. So my one suggestion for this would be that being cool or being calm doesn't come in a day, or it doesn't come for a day. So one could practice this for say 10 days or 15 days before, the sleeping patterns, etc. One could practice sleeping at the same time, waking up at the same time, giving the mock test at the time of the actual exam, so that one practices this calmness and writing papers without getting confused. Especially the sleeping pattern, I would say, is the key, because many times we're not able to sleep the night before, and that affects our performance. Apart from that, I would say that prelims is becoming very difficult, and it's important the examination day is becoming the key. So one needs to see how they can improve their examination day performance. Coming to mains, sir. Mains, as I said, sir, mainly mock tests. But if we go back to the preparation part aspects of GS 1, 2, 3, 4, how to look at all these papers. So first paper, the static paper, sir. Static paper, I made value mostly in my final attempt, sir. It was in the last attempt that I gave, it was mainly about value addition and how to improve my scores. What I saw was that we need to in each paper, this is not just for GS1, sir, it's very important to have keywords. So writing keywords instead of long sentences is the key that would fetch us marks, because that would tell the examiner in one glance that we know the matter well. Keywords, and then in history, in whatever the subject is, there are always some key aspects. For example, in geography, it could be diagrams well captioned and well we have to label the diagrams well. And in history, it could be dates and names of places, names of people, and names of the events. For example, it could be the International Congress session of a certain year that one would want to refer to. And so bringing out these value added materials in each of the GS papers, I believe is important. For that, one could have a very short say one paper material for say history, one paper material for geography, with only value added things, where you've written value added things, and then you revise this multiple times, maybe 20-25 times, and you could glance through it even before the exam, so that you bring them out in the actual paper. Apart from that, how to use and improve the usage of value added materials in the mains, actual mains, is through mock tests again. Because in mock tests, with each iteration, you see that in the first iteration, you would maybe know a lot of value added materials, diagrams, dates, everything, stats, a lot of things, but you were able to only put 20% of it. Maybe you would see this in the first iteration. As you move forward into the second iteration, and when you look at your own papers, you can realize that I know much more than this, I've only put a very little. In the second iteration, you see that whatever you know and whatever you put, maybe it increases. So if you can bring this up to 90%, if you can even put in the paper 90% of what you have learned, what you know, that would fetch you a lot of marks. So sir, this is about value added materials. It is specific to each paper, and we all know that in GS3 it is a lot of stats, in GS2 it is articles and articles from the Constitution. It's these Supreme Court cases, Supreme Court judgments, and these have this information has become very common these days. But my 2 cents only is that how to improve the information, how to improve the percentage of information that we are putting in our papers, because we know a lot, we put very little in our papers. So if we want to improve this, it again has to happen in iterations. So that's one good way of doing this thing. And in mains, as I was just discussing with sir also, that it changes from year to year, the level, the standard of competition. Therefore, it's important, even if you've given the exam the previous year and done well also, but it's important to take the test series again, because only then you realize where you stand in the competition of the current year. Because there's also this ranking system, whatever is given. So one should use it in a very I would say in a very positive way, not in any other extra competitive direction, but in a very positive way to understand that you are in the competition and your writing is going in the right direction. So that helps improve the performance. Yes, sir. And sir, do I have to speak about the interview also now, sir?
I think I'll ask about some things, I think, which you
Yes,
would be the right person to ask.
Yes,
Preparation of a working candidate. You have been a working candidate this time when you gave the examination. So what were your challenges? How did you prepare as a working candidate?
sir, so this is something that I would say it's the same for working and normal professionals. We are able to take out 8 hours, sir, even when we are working, because mostly our office starts at 10 o'clock kind of. So if you are a morning person, like I was a morning person, I used to wake up early, like I used to start by 5 o'clock. So I got a lot of time before I went to office only. And if one studies at night, sir, even then from evening onwards, they can get a lot of time. So if we can have a schedule, sir, if we can have a schedule and follow it regularly, I believe it doesn't really have any issue. For working professionals, sir, for example, online test series, online classes, these are of great help, because now everything can be, one doesn't need to go anywhere. So I've used these a lot to my advantage, especially last year due to COVID, everything had moved to online. Like, for example, even mentoring after each test had moved online, so through Zoom calls, etc. And that was of great help to me, sir. So I was sitting only in one place and I could complete the entire preparation.
So you said you were able to prepare for 8 hours. I think
Yes,
a lot of beginners come and say that I'm not able to study. And as a working candidate, 8 hours you said, so from morning 5 to 9, I'm
yes, sir.
assuming, and
Yes.
then after you come back from work, let's say 7 to 11. Is that how it was, or what was your
Yes,
plan
sir.
for the weekend? How did you prepare the weekends?
So weekends used to be full days. So majorly, sir, especially the current time, that is between prelims and mains, all my weekends were spent giving tests, sir. Because one has to give GS tests, one has to give psychology tests and essay. So it becomes like I used to, my days I just had 2 days between tests. So my schedule was like how many tests I have to write, and entire schedule was centered around those tests. So weekends mostly used to go in writing 2 papers, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. This is how I spent my time between prelims and mains.
This is something
Yes,
that
sir.
I've found common among service candidates, especially people who are
Yes,
in job or who are in training.
yes, sir.
They write a lot of tests, and they write a test one every day, or every alternate day they write a test.
Yes.
Was that how many tests did you write between prelims and
No,
mains?
no, sir. I did this iteration, sir, because I gave a mains in 2017, and I know that if one is not able to write 4 together, then there is no point, because writing one is very easy, sir, but not very easy. Writing one is not the actual test, sir. Actual test is how do you write 2 in a day and 4 in 2 days. So I used to that is what my preparation used to be, right, sir? So how do I sit, because it takes a toll on a person, especially by the time we reach our ethics paper in the actual exam. One is very tired, and how does one still perform in that paper? So I tried to practice that only, sir. So that's why I kept the weekends for GS, and psychology I used to do somewhere in between, sir. Somewhere in between I used to somehow adjust psychology papers.
So you said on weekends you used to write 4 tests: Saturday
Four.
2 tests and Sunday
Yes, sir.
4 tests.
Yes, sir.
So how many iterations of this 4 tests have you done?
I could do only 4, sir. Maybe as per calculation, I should do more, but I did 4, sir. And I took the final exam. There's a Shankar IS final exam. It's called
Open test.
open test. Yes, sir. Open test I took. I wrote that also.
So you
So
basically
write
wrote
4
16
then.
tests.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. GS. Yes,
This
sir.
is very interesting because most people talk about writing full tests.
Yes,
I
sir.
think this is the first time, honestly, in the last I've
Yes, sir.
first time heard from somebody that you have to do it back to back 2 days, and
Yes, sir.
I think that's a very good suggestion. At
Yes, sir.
least closer to the examination, people should try this.
Yes. So initially I was not able to do it. So initially I could only write 1, and then I used to get tired. But by the end I pulled it, sir. By the end I was able to, these open tests especially, I gave 4 back to back, sir.
For back to back.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have started, I'm assuming the first year you secured rank was in 2018, CSC
Yes,
2007.
sir. Yes, sir.
So my assumption is that you started preparing somewhere in 2017. How do you sustain the motivation for such a long time? Now, this is almost 4-5 years now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, sir, especially from my previous attempt when I got into service and now, so my only thing has been that I knew that there was a lot of scope for improvement, and I knew that I had not given my best yet. So one can only, I didn't want to carry the burden of that for my entire life, that I have not given my best. So that kept me going, that I will give my best, only then I will stop. So, yes, sir.
We keep telling this to students that, the outcome is not in your hand. This is what I want to hear from people, that, I gave my best. I can't do more than this.
Yes, yes, sir.
That should be the goal, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, in your answer sheets, I'll share the screen and show some of your answer sheets to the students, right? This is Monica's test too. I see it that you write extensively and you write points without much explanation. Was this the same strategy in the previous test also? Previous
No,
exam
sir.
also?
No, sir. So I think this is one of the previous tests. After this, we had one more iteration, and in that you had told me the same thing, that sir, what you're saying now, that I'm not writing full sentences and I'm writing just basic points. So this is something that I would like to point out. I think this is not the right thing, sir. One has to write basic level of sentence. Otherwise, it becomes it doesn't look like an answer, sir. It might look like some short notes of a person, and the examiner might not appreciate it. So in my actual exam, and even during the next iteration, sir, I wrote in points. I gave numbers and I wrote sentences, basic sentences. Yes.
One trend that we are seeing these days is that there is a very high, what do you call, importance given for value addition. The data points, like,
Yes.
judgments, articles, examples.
Yes.
How did you revise, or what did you do to remember so much content and replicate in your
Yes.
answers?
Yes. Sir, I'll speak about this from a psychology student perspective, sir. In psychology, we talk about memory in two terms. One is audio through the like how we remember rhymes as a child. That is through the audio encoding, and second is through visuals. So that's why when we are sitting in prelims paper, we remember our history textbook paper, the sheet where the exact page number where we read that. So there's visual encoding. So these are the two ways, sir. Usually these are the ways we remember. We don't use audio much in our UPSC preparation. It's visual only. Therefore, for revision, sir, it's important to stick to one source. Not only one source, but also one thing, like one paper. Say, suppose we have written our notes in one book, one needs to revise from the same notebook, other than like say revising the same material from 4 different places, because then one would get confused in the exam as to what it was. We encode visually, we see and we encode visually, sir. So coming to the revision strategy, sir, I used to write down these things on pages. Maybe initially I had 4-page notes for value added material. Towards the exam, it used to be half, sir, because every time, the next time I made a note or made this thing, it used to be from my memory. Instead of looking at something and writing, copying notes, it used to be from my memory. Then I knew that how much I'm able to remember and which are the things that are standing out and I'm remembering. Because in the actual exam, what matters is what is coming to our mind first. So making the notes shorter and shorter as we go further, and using them. And sir, another way of remembering is through this iteration that I've told before about. In each iteration, sir, our memory becomes sharper in terms of value added material. We'll not show our entire preparation in our first iteration, but it will come through, especially by the final actual UPSC exam. 90% of it will come, but we have to go through this route of writing again.
I think this, in the context of this iteration, one interesting thing you said is that after every test, you go back to the paper and see what more you could have done.
Yes,
And
it
this
is.
is also something that I'm finding common among people who clear the examination.
Yes.
They're constantly looking for improvement. What should I have added in this paper? What more points could I have written? And I think that would have made significant improvement in your papers from one test to the next test to the next test.
Yes.
So now I'll ask some paper-specific areas. Now, paper one, art and culture, like this year, there were a lot of questions which nobody expected, Persian literature, and there were questions. What is your preparation strategy for art and culture in mains?
So art and culture, I have very short notes for which I had prepared for prelims, sir. So it has all the names book names, for example, Persian literature. We have Saini Akbari and all the names of the books we had written for prelims only, like studied for prelims. So I made it a point to revise that well. Well means like multiple times before I go for mains also. Because I knew that even if I don't know an answer very well, adding value by writing the names of books and the authors who wrote those books will help me fetch marks. So this has been my strategy, sir. And in art and culture, I remember there was a question about Buddhist Vikramshila monastery, sir. So I could not remember much, so I drew a map of India and I showed where Vikramshila is, and I showed how Buddhism spread how Buddhism spread through this place, the Pala area. So whatever I could remember, sir, the information perspective, the value added perspective, I put it there, and then I made sentences out of it. So things that I didn't use.
So you had a collection of maps and diagrams for art and culture. Did you pre-prepare this in advance?
I didn't have a collection of maps, sir, but I had a collection of information. So India map I had anyway, India and world map I had anyway practiced multiple times. So I drew it and I showed the place, the region of Pala, where the Palas were, and Vikramshila, and how things moved from there.
Moving on from art and culture, I think another important area in paper one is society, which accounts for 70-80 marks in paper one.
Yes.
What was your approach for society? That's one area where I feel a lot of people neglect and take it on a lighter note.
Yes. So I don't know whether this, whatever I've done for society has worked or not. So, but I had very short notes because the society is very compact that ways. If we look at the past 7-8 years papers, we know which are the topics that are coming and they are repeated every year. So it could be women, globalization, caste issues, they are repeated every year. So it's very easy to have a sort of a basic structure of the answer prepared, and one could add examples to it, and one could yes sir, one could add examples to it. Basically, yes sir. So I had notes prepared for these from basics, so I just used them. And in some art and society questions, sir, one can also draw representational diagrams. Like it could be some sort of a diagram, sir, like a flow diagram showing the cause to effect of whatever is happening.
I'll share the screen and I'll show one of the diagrams that you had used in one of the tests in art and society. Yes. I think that would make sense. So this question was about major paradox of caste and rising group identity. This was one of the pictorial representation that Mounica had used. So I think diagrams add spice or variety to the answer. It differentiates the answer from others.
So these diagrams also I had prepared. So I had for globalization, I had a diagram. For caste, I had a diagram. So it's basically we are showing the cause and effect, sir. So but in a representation form instead of a sentence.
I completely agree when you say that society is very predictable, because every year there's a question on globalization, urbanization, gender, population, poverty. So what I advise people about society is that, you prepare the keyword, question will come from the keyword.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think that's something that can work for people who want to improve marks in paper one.
Yes.
And I also think that, a lot of people give emphasis on art and culture, world history, post-independence, modern history. Yes. But what they don't realize is that the weightage of all these topics combined is equal to the weightage of society.
Yes, sir. Yes, very true, sir.
That's something that they could work on. Geography, did you have a lot of diagrams prepared?
Yes, and so geography was, sometimes I drew two, sir, because geography was, yes, sir. And mostly the diagrams, sir, there's a very simple trick for maps, sir. If one can have India map and world map outlines on their fingertips, like one can do it quickly, then one can represent almost anything, because we know which are the regions of which, sir. It's just about putting there. So we don't need to prepare many maps. We just need to know the outline and then easily we can do it.
If I break down geography, I think I broadly classify this into human geography, physical geography, environmental geography. I think human geography and economic geography is similar.
Yes.
So what was your strategy for, let's say, economic geography, especially questions like location of industries or human geography? These part, what was your sources?
Sir, again, sir, location of industries and all, so these are very common topics. So these notes are easily available, sir. So we know that there are certain factors for location, and it's almost like very obvious, sir. These are the factors on which location is based. So, sir, in geography, it's important to name the places rather than just write we need to bring in more detailing, sir, in geography. So I think this is something I missed in my previous attempt. If we can bring in the detailing, the names of the places, etc., very clearly, and even geography diagrams, sir, the labeling can, the more detailed the labeling is, the better marks one might get. Yes, sir.
We had a session with Meera yesterday. So one interesting question one of the viewers asked was, you have been writing exam for a few years. You have been preparing for a few years.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Do you
sir.
find any pattern in mains questions? I think that's a wrong question to ask for prelims, but definitely for mains, do you find any patterns in the question?
So mains has, especially last year, sir, I found it to be very predictable, almost like, I mean, maybe there are one or two questions in every paper which were outliers, but that happens every year. So, but even the outliers last year were comparatively very easy compared to the previous years. It's almost become like, sir, very predictable. So the competition is very high, but if you look at it, it has become like board exams. So board exam, we knew that it would be on these lines. Maybe it would change this year, one doesn't know, but yes, sir. So I think the mains is very predictable. In the all three stages, mains is the most predictable stage.
I think I agree to this because we had done a post mains analysis comparing UPSC questions with our questions, and we
Yes,
found
sir.
we hit a lot of themes. And I think last year was a lucky year.
Yes,
Hopefully, this year is also a lucky year. But last year, most questions were predictable: COVID and
yes, sir.
healthcare,
Yes,
GST, and you had a lot of predictable areas being asked
yes,
last year,
yes, sir.
right? So, moving on, paper two,
Yes.
especially the polity part of it. What was your strategy for the static area, and what was your strategy for the dynamic part of polity?
Sir, I think there's this interaction of static and dynamic. That's how the questions come out, sir. So it's important to prepare it from that perspective only. For example, if there are any defections happening, which is so only then there will be questions on anti-defection and what are the various things related to the current happenings around defection, sir. So when we write a polity answer, sir, it has to be holistic in the sense that the article has to come out very clearly in maybe in the introduction itself, the constitutional article, and then if there are any, then whatever is the answer to the question, sir, the arguments that we are presenting to and fro, for both for and against, and then conclusion. So I again, sir, relied a lot on. The value added material. So here it would be the articles, the Supreme Court judgments, and yes, sir. So if there is any legislative aspect also involved, any act or anything has been passed or any bill is there, I would bring all of that out, sir. Sir, I think in GS, all papers, sir, it's important to prepare, sir. Prepare in the sense that this is something I didn't do in my previous attempt, that one needs to anti-defection, sir. It's again a very predictable thing. So the points should be on one's fingertips so that in the actual paper, one doesn't waste any time. So the competition is very close if one goes, especially in the mains, because since the paper is predictable, that's why the competition is becoming closer. So therefore, not wasting even a single minute, not wasting even a single second to think about what is the next point should be the way forward. If one does that, if one sits in the exam hall and tries to remember or tries to make arguments, one is out of the competition, sir. So
That's a very good argument
yes,
because I remember something that Anudeep had said that the
yes,
top 5,000 candidates in this examination refer the same sources, attend the same
yes, sir.
classes, and have the same content.
Test series also.
So
Yes, sir.
if you want to go from that 5,000 to the top 500 or the top
Yes, sir.
100, everything counts. Like
Yes,
every
sir.
minute detail,
Yes, sir.
every experience, and every
Yes, sir.
practice counts, right?
Yes, sir.
So, what was your source for current affairs? Did you make your own notes for paper two, paper three current affairs? And what was the point of reference? Like, if somebody is going to write mains this year, what area of current affairs or what duration of current affairs should they be covering, according to you?
So current affairs need to be covered in a not in a duration or that sort of a sense. They need to be linked with the syllabus topics and covered. So for example, RTI is a topic given in GS2, and one needs to see, like last year there were changes in the RTI. There were changes related to the CIC, tenure of CIC, and some autonomy given to CIC, the Chief Information Commissioner. So, and that question also came up anyway. So from the syllabus perspective, topic has to be prepared, sir. And whatever are the happenings, whatever new things are happening, also those new things need to be put into perspective as to how it is done, and then we need to take it forward.
Social justice part of paper 2. This is where the health, education, skill development, and I think this is one area in the syllabus of GS2 where there are no material available. There are no books available. It's very dynamic in nature. And I think this has a weightage of 30 to 40 marks out of 250, right? So what was your sources? Was it just newspapers, or did you prepare separately for this?
No, sir, I used to, again, sir, the base for these topics should be the old questions, sir. So we know which direction the questions have been asked. Then the stats form the introduction, sir, and the stats increase the weight of our argument. They justify our arguments. After that, sir, the arguments have to be prepared, sir, and these material can be easily accessed anywhere, sir. So it's the same. The argument is usually the same, sir. Suppose we are talking about healthcare, then we will say something like low number of the ratio of doctor to patient is very like high or low, whatever it is in India. The beds are very low per patient in India. All of that, those arguments, sir. So these arguments need to be pre-prepared. Mostly, what are the issues with our health sector? And as whenever the question comes, then we just put those arguments in the right. There are mostly parts in a question, so we put them in the right part and we.
I think one pattern that I see in the social justice part of paper 2 is that this is the most pessimistic part of the whole syllabus. This is the part where UPSC always asks, we have so many schemes, why still we have poverty?
Yes.
Right. This is the tone of this area. So you have to look at. So I think one question that we had framed is that poverty. I think it was not asked last year, but this year also I'm expecting that because of COVID, how many people went back to poverty? How has the incidence of poverty increased because of COVID? So I think for this area, you have to constantly think about government initiatives, why it is working, why it is not working in every sector possible, right? So I think IR also, you would probably have the same response in the terms of your approach towards it. And moving on to paper 3, you have economy, agriculture, you have security, you have disaster management, environment, science and tech. Any specific strategies for any of this area that was different from your other areas?
No, sir. It was also extensively about adding value, and the arguments were mostly pre-prepared, sir. Arguments one only needs to quickly think in the exam about where to put the argument and in which direction should we place the argument, in terms of there are 2-3 parts in a question. So we have to address each part. So where do our arguments fit, and one needs to put that, and the value addition, etc. So nothing special, sir.
I think the advantage of having arguments pre-prepared is that I think there will be a lot of interlinkage between syllabus keyword.
Yes, it is.
What works for disaster management could be useful in environment, or could be useful in let's say paper 1 gender. You have such experiences. Were you able to interuse syllabus?
Yes, sir, very much, sir. In the actual exam, sir, I think we are always thinking on our feet in the actual exam. So these interlinkages must be happening very unconsciously also, so we are able to put them. So in the actual exam, it's very important to write this is from, now that I have got these marks and ranks, sir, I can only say that it's very important to just write above average decent answers for each question. Not write any answer just like that, like one has written something few keywords, or one has drawn a round and made some keywords just to fill a paper. That's not how you complete a paper. So properly, decently finish all the questions. And so that's also a mistake that I made, also I think others also might do, that we think we have to write something very special or bring out something very different in our answers. That is not the right strategy. And that one realizes when one does this iterations, because what one realizes is it's important to write all 20 answers well to score well, rather than writing 2-3 answers very well. I used to do that in my first iteration of GSR. I wrote 2-3 answers very well, like almost I used to overshoot the space, and I used to leave 2-3 questions. So it doesn't help. I saw one mock paper of some other person last year. It was related to flood resistant buildings, and the person had wrote a lot of specific civil engineering things in that. So again, that also would not fetch any extra marks. I don't think so, because it's a generalist paper. So it's important if we can put the basics and write a decent answer with decent representation. Representations are also, I just made some points here. So it's not just about the diagrams value added, but also the spacing, like how does your overall paper look? In that, again, a mentor can help you. Like, is it very crowded in a certain place? Are you crowding your diagrams and writing points right next to your diagram? Things like that. Because if your paper looks neat, it's not about the handwriting, sir, but it's about the spacing, etc. I think it can improve your overall score.
So
Yes.
we had Meera yesterday.
Yes.
So she said in the first attempt she gave, she has sociology optional, and she
Yes.
wrote a lot of thinkers and technical keywords in paper one society, and it backfired.
Yes,
And
sir, yes.
I think that's a very important thing. You don't bring your optional knowledge into the GS papers. Don't
Yes, sir.
write
Yes, sir.
content out here.
Yes.
And I completely agree with that argument that a good paper is not a paper with 2-3 good answers. It's a paper with 10 or 12 above average answers and 5-6 average answers.
Yes.
Don't
Yes.
aim for perfection. Perfection is not a great idea. You have to write good answers and not perfect answers.
Yes.
I completely stick to that. Now, in paper 1, 2, 3, you would have come across instances where there are questions that you have no idea, or you have very little idea. What was your strategy for such kind of questions?
So thankfully, this year I found that such questions were less. I think everybody would agree with me. In the previous years, they were more. So if there is absolutely something that one doesn't know anything and one doesn't have even the time, then maybe it is good to leave, sir. But in this year, thanks to my iterations, I had time. Even my last question, I had 6 minutes. Even on my 20th question, 6 to 7 minutes. So I was able to attempt all questions. And if one doesn't know anything also, with 6 minutes, there's a lot one can write or one can bring. So that would add at least 1 or 2 marks extra. This year, sir, there were no such questions, I think. But I think this year there were very few such questions.
I think art and culture is the only part where they could be considered as bouncers for some people at least.
Yes, sir. Yes.
But otherwise, in paper 2, paper 3, there was nothing that was.
Yes, sir.
Last Cyberdome question. Cyberdome question.
Yes,
or last?
No, sir. Previously.
That was a bouncer in that year.
Sir. Yes, sir.
So this year there has not been any bouncers.
Yes.
Right. Now coming to ethics, right? Yes. Did you start with case studies or did you start with part A? What is your usual strategy?
So I started with part A, sir, but after writing 5 questions, I used to go to case studies. But this is whatever is the strategy in ethics needs to be repeated, sir. One cannot adopt it in the final exam. So I had done this in my 4 or 5 papers before my actual paper. I used to do 4 or 5 questions in the first because that creates impression, and then go to case studies, finish them, and write the other questions. Yes, sir.
This time, I think one thing that has happened is that the case studies are extremely lengthy.
Yes.
Did you find it difficult to complete the paper in ethics this time?
I could just finish the paper, sir, but completing the paper is, sir, it comes with a lot of practice, sir. I think I told you after writing my open test also, sir, that I am not able to complete my paper. But maybe final exam I was able to, so maybe because of the exam situation, but it will not come in one time. It has to be done. And that is why, sir, even for people like me who are in service and giving the exam, or who are giving the exam after having written mains, it's important to write the test series even that year, because otherwise the speed won't catch up with the speed.
So I usually suggest people not to write 7 questions in 1 hour, because that 1 hour into 3 hours is not a 3-hour paper.
Yes, sir.
3-hour paper, it's the last 30 minutes or last 45 minutes which is your challenge.
Yes, sir.
I think that's something. So going back to ethics now, part A, what was the role of value addition in the form of examples and keywords and quotes in your part A in case study?
Yes, sir. Sir, I didn't make it. Sir, ethics is a very simple paper, sir. Actually, I think it's the most people misunderstand it.
I think psychology student in you that's saying this. I think a lot of people have a problem with ethics. People with psychology, philosophy, I feel that they have a relatively more edge
Yes,
in
sir.
ethics paper.
Sir, if we can write our answer in a relatively interesting manner that the examiner wouldn't be bored, and that also means that we are not putting value added material only. Like we cannot just put examples or we cannot just put diagrams. Sir. There have to be explanatory sentences about the argument. They usually present an argument. We are explaining that argument. It could be through points or through paragraphs, and then examples to substantiate those arguments. And then one could add, I have added some representational diagrams. So ethics paper I could finish because I added 2-3 flow diagrams in ethics. That's how one can fill the paper and one can finish the paper.
Part A of ethics I broadly classify into core ethics, governance, and quotes. So quote-based questions. Every year there is 3 quotation questions, right? What is your approach towards quotation questions?
Sir, I followed exactly what you told, sir. I was also very confused initially. So, sir, whatever you told to explain it, and then, so you showed me a paper of a previous year topper. So I followed it, sir. I wrote the example, and maybe if there's a diagram that I can make with certain aspects, that's it. And yes, sir. Very simple, sir. Nothing complicated and nothing to be afraid of, sir. Usually we are afraid of these things, but there's nothing to be afraid of. If one can write a decent answer, there's nothing to be afraid. One will get good marks. Yes. Sir, and also in ethics, sir, I remember in some test series, I used to write certain a definition, and it used to be marked wrong. Wrong, sir. Can there be anything wrong? And I used to get they used to give me sometimes very less mark, 2 marks, think that this is not the definition. So this again is a wrong practice. There cannot be, you cannot learn definitions word to word, sir, and it's a very wrong way of teaching children, because this is again they're putting fear into the minds of people that if you don't write in this way, then you will not get marks. That's not right. One needs to have a.
In terms of
Yes,
definition, what I usually suggest is that,
yes,
identify 1 or 2 keywords that should
yes,
be there in the definition on integrity.
Yes,
And you frame your answer around that keyword. Write
yes,
simplistic and definitions. Because
yes,
like I said, like you said, it can't be wrong. There are 2
yes,
places where there cannot be wrong answers in UPSC preparation,
yes,
ethics and essay. There
yes,
can be different perspectives, but it can't be
yes,
wrong. I
yes,
completely agree with that.
yes,
So anybody who's listening, if you want to have a definition, don't mug up. If under pressure, you will not be able to perform when you mug up
yes,
definitions word to
yes.
word. So use keywords and explain that. So going back to case studies, like, how were your introduction? How were your conclusions? Do you have a specific approach for case studies in paper 4?
Yes, sir. Again, sir, I think in that also I followed your advice, sir. Case studies again should not seem very skeletal, sir. Usually, people start with a diagram saying that uh, these are the stakeholders. Stakeholders will come somewhere in between, sir, or somewhere after writing the introduction. Introduction should be, if one can just basically explain the case, not explain the case in brief, but suppose there is a case about women, gender issues, or issues related to atrocities or women on women or something. One can just introduce saying that as per the NCRB statistics, the crime rate against women has increased so much, and therefore this is a pertinent thing that one needs to look at. So to introduce the idea and then get to the case, introduce the idea of that question and then get. Or even corruption, sir, one can start with the statistics, if one has some statistics, or if one has any quote or anything, and then move, and then start with the stakeholders, etc. And then write answer in parts, sir, so that the examiner finds it easy to identify where one has written.
I think this deals with GS 1, 2, 3, 4. Essay, is this an improvement over your previous score, or how has your previous essay score been? You remember?
So it was 140, sir, last time, and this year it is 131. So I think the scaling is different this year. So I've scored better compared to last year this time.
This year, I think the highest score I have seen is only 140, 150 is what I have
Yes,
seen.
yes.
Maybe there is somebody more than that. But I think to 2017, I think it did go up to 175 or 170. I think there was somebody who got 175 that
Yes,
year.
yes,
There was a top 40 rank holder. There was rank 39, if I'm not wrong, who had
Yes.
175 that year.
Yes.
So essay, what is your strategy? Especially for abstract essay, this is one area where people have doubt. Being a psychology student, I think you would have an advantage there maybe.
No, sir. Actually, again, this has also backfired for me. Not this year, but in my one of my previous mails, bringing too many concepts of psychology is not advisable. Or writing names of psychologists, it can be total Greek and Latin for examiners who don't know about these things. So that's bringing that is not advisable, sir. But one can bring in one. Like in SSR, there's this PESTEL approach, or whatever that acronym is, approach of writing about the political aspect, the economic aspect, social, technological, ethical, and I add one that is psychological aspect in my arguments. So, for example, if they say simple living and high thinking is the way to be, so it can be explained from the psychological perspective also. That simple living helps our mind be clear and calm, and that helps our thinking, and that helps us take good decisions in life. And then it could be substantiated with some examples. So I followed this approach, sir, in the essay of following this PESTEL approach, arguing from various perspectives. And essay should flow, sir. So one needs to have connecting sentences, etc. And yes, sir. So basically, essay also, again, sir, the issue is not what works, because it's very simple. But there's a fear imbibed in people, and I was in me also. Like I used to write a test series, and I got very high marks in one essay, very low marks in one essay. So how can that be? It's the same person writing. It's the same person arguing. So essays cannot essays cannot be like an answer, sir. Like this point has to be there. I was once given a remark that this point has to be there. How come it is not there? So there's nothing to be afraid.
I think in essay there is no rules. I think why there is a big variation between marks in essays, that what I find as a good essay may not be good for you, or
Yes,
somebody else will have a different essay.
yes,
Now I see this increasing trend of people using diagrams and maps and illustrations in essays. And imagine writing that in your school essay. Your teacher would have been very angry. Why do you have a map in your essay? So I think the perception of essay is different among different people.
yes,
So this is one, especially when we are running a test series also, this is
Yes,
one
sir.
part where we find it very difficult to maintain a equilibrium of marking, because
Yes,
different
sir.
people have different perceptions of essay.
Yes, sir.
So what I keep telling people is that, if you get good marks in 1 year, don't do anything, just go and do what you have done. Don't try to improve,
Yes, sir.
use
Yes, sir.
techniques, and don't
Yes,
write
sir.
mechanical content. I think don't write
Yes, sir.
collection of
Yes,
GS
sir.
answers.
Yes, sir.
That's what we usually suggest, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. True.
So,
Sir, in essays, the diagrams, if it is flowing, I mean, it flows with the
so the thing
question
is that
only then, sir.
So the thing is that, like, if I say that, you can't draw a diagram, somebody's
Yes,
going to
sir.
come back with Ira Singh's essay and say that there's a map in this. What are you saying? So there is no right thing or wrong thing in a subject like essay and
Yes, sir.
essay.
Yes,
There
sir.
can be a lot of different variations in which you can go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Right? So moving on, I have no clue about psychology and its syllabus and anything, but
Yes,
if you
sir.
have to add some things for anybody who's watching from psychology optional, in terms of sources or in terms of approach, if you have to add anything, what would it be?
Yes, sir. So psychology. So again, one thing that works, because we are writing a competitive exam, sir. So is that you have to write mock exams and take feedback and then write the next mock. This has to be followed, sir. Even in psychology, sir, the one has to prepare towards the end. One has to have very short, crisp notes, because in the exam one doesn't have time to think, sit and remember things, or sit and think about which argument to be put forward. It needs to be prepared. So psychology is a very traditional optional, sir, in the sense that the questions are usually the same every year. They don't vary a lot. Maybe one odd question would be some new research has come, and one odd question would be like that. But otherwise, it's very traditional. So it can be very well prepared, sir. And psychology is a science subject, so it not a science subject, but it's a scientific paper. So one can add diagrams, and one can bring in some stats into it. Apart from that, sir, psychology, it's very important to quote studies and names of psychologists after every argument. Instead of saying it as a layman argument, it's important to quote the study and quote the psychologist who has done it to substantiate it. Yes.
That has been put by one of the viewers. He asked, should we sync our preparation with test schedule, or just give test and follow our own schedule? So he's basically saying that, sometimes it's very difficult to complete subject as per test schedule.
Yes, sir. So I think one can make one's own schedule if one is confident that one will stick to it. Because it's about discipline, sir. Either you stick to the schedule given by the test series, or you make your own schedule, but you stick to it. It cannot be like you're not disciplined.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think I have nothing more to ask. This is more or less
Yes,
what it is. Thank you so much. Thank you for
yes,
your inputs, and thank you for your time.
yes, sir. So, and I just have one thing to add, sir, and that is that mostly every year we see that toppers speak, and that is something I'm also doing now. But I think the teachers or our mentors in TESI, they are the best people to know, because we sometimes miss certain points, even if we prepare and then speak, because it's
I think
easy
I
to
have
miss.
a different opinion out here, because a lot of these things, if you ask me how much I helped Anudeep or how much Anudeep helped me, I don't know, to be honest. Like, there are a lot of things that he has done which I tell people. There are some things now, even in your case, there will be a lot of things that the mentors have told you, but there are a lot of improvisations that you have made. Now, for example, I think my best takeaway for today's session is that, you need to write 4 tests back to back at least 2 or 3 times before the examination. This is the first time I'm hearing from someone. So as much as you're saying that, you should listen from mentors, I think when somebody succeeds,
Yes.
because what I keep telling people is that, there are, let's say, n number of people who come to us for advice, and we give similar advice to everyone. But how is it possible that some secure a top 10 rank or some secure a top 100 rank? So there's that personal element that everybody brings on the table.
Yes.
So I always quote Abhishek Surana on this. This was a guy who was willing to learn even from beginners. Like, even from a first timer, he'll take notes and he'll learn. So my opinion out here is that, yes, we would have a certain perspective and we would have a certain experience to share. But when somebody clears the examination in a given year, I think it's very
Yes.
important to listen to them and understand what worked for them,
Yes.
because that's your best example of what is working, right?
Yes, sir.
That
Yes.
closest to what you can get on what works at UPSC, right? You can continue.
And also the papers of, suppose there's a test, sir. Usually the topper of that test, the papers are uploaded, even in the test series that we are writing. Now, so after I wrote the paper and after my paper was checked, or before, I used to see the topper's paper as to see what is different in my answer and their answers, so that I can improve. And a lot of these diagrams, sir, when one is usually worried about how to prepare, I used to get from their papers. I've copied so many.
I keep telling people that the solution is not your best reference point, because solution is something that 3 people sit on Google and search and type and
Yes, sir.
GTP and give it to you.
Yes,
You
sir.
can never emulate a solution in 3 hours.
Yes,
But
sir.
a topper's answer or a best answer is always
Yes.
your best source of reference.
Yes, sir.
And I think this is something I keep telling. If you want examples, if you want diagrams, go through topper's copies, take screenshots from that.
Yes.
That's your
And
best.
of the current year also, sir, the people who are topping the tests, so
Right.
it's it becomes very easy to grasp that, sir, because our paper is just 1 month away or 2 months away. So whatever we see, we grasp. For example, sir, I saw one copy where the student had drawn a flood resistant building. He drew it. It was very simple, sir, that we see in Northeast usually on. It's on a stand, like sticks, 4 sticks, and on
I
top
think
of
you're
that there's.
referring to Divya's copy. I think this diagram was in Divya's copy. It's there in the copies that we have uploaded. She has got the highest marks in GS this year. She has got 455 marks.
So I did that in my final paper also, sir.
Right. I think that's a very good idea to scavenge for diagrams and examples from Topos copy.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much. Is there
Yes,
anybody? I think we just have a few participants. Anybody wants to ask anything? Sindhu, Sunny, any questions that you guys would want to raise? No, it looks like no. Right. I think there's a question. 1 second. No questions. Okay. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes, sir.
Right. Is it raining in Kannur, like across all parts of Kerala? Is it heavily
It's
raining?
on and off, sir. On and off.
Right.
Yes.
Because it's raining everywhere in Kerala and it's
Yes,
bad.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.